Well, Gilgamesh. Thank you, Phoebe. I have some fresh brewed coffee here. Should any of you desire some, just come up, take a sip. Not you. I don't really know at what stage people begin to write anything that they find valuable for themselves. Oftentimes what happens is that you have an experience, and most of the experiences that we have in life are quite childish and ridiculous and infantile. Sometimes there are these experiences that just stand out. And it takes you a while to figure them out because they're physical, emotional, intellectual, and if you happen to have some spiritual components to you, something about you opens up and you're forced to think and feel, and it's a really, really difficult place to be. I remember I had a friend who was married from the age 27, and she was going through a divorce process. She was about 33 or so. And then the papers came in from the courts. All she had to do was to sign them. For the first time, when she saw all the forms, she came to realize that this is in fact very, very serious. And just the physical presence of these forms put her in a shock. She left the forms on the counter for about 6 months. You have about almost 6 months to kind of sign and return. In other words, you have to start the whole process again. And so she had to kind of go through, all the impacts that what signing these forms could mean for her. Some of you in this class have journals, and you try to keep them hidden, secret from other people. But before you actually put them into your journal, what you do is you kind of get confused as to what to do with this experience that now lives inside you. It's kind of like Plato and Socrates. You're minding your own business, life is going relatively well. All of a sudden something happens. You no longer want to go to the party that you promised your friends that you'd be there. You no longer enjoy going to school or making money. You go home, but you don't want to talk to your wife or to your husband or to your kids or to your parents. You just go to your room, lock the door, turn off the lights, and sit there. Maybe you scream, maybe you cry, maybe you're just quiet like a monk. Who the hell knows? But it takes you a while to kind of figure out what's happening inside you. And then you try to talk about your experience to your friends. And talking is really, really cheap. It's something that I've been doing for the past 30 years. It means nothing. Because you're never tested, you see, in talking. You can come to the classroom and talk like a monk or a sage or a philosopher, but be a scumbag outside of it. And I assure you, I'm more of a scumbag than a philosopher. You don't have to agree to that, Karen. Come on. We're friends.
It's not about it.
I am just joking. That's awful. And then there comes this tragic moment that you've talked to so many people only to realize that you've been misunderstood. You're tired of being frustrated. You're tired of keep pushing your friends to understand you. And then you completely just walk away from the whole thing. You just go to Ross, you buy yourself a nice notebook, you go to your room, light a candle, perhaps turn on some nice soft music like Snoop Dogg, and you sit there and you write. And as you're writing, you realize that yes, you're writing out all the emotions, but as you reread what you have written, you realize that it's just not very coherent. There are lots of gaps, lots of holes. And the point I'm trying to make is the following, that the things that we write and are valuable to us, it takes a long, long, long time. So next time you open a journal and you write, know something about yourself. You don't have any friends. You don't have goal. You don't have a husband or a wife. You're all alone, and it's your journal that happens to be the most faithful companion you will have for that night. The story we'll talk about tonight is called the Epic of Gilgamesh. And there is something nice about epics. For those of you in this class who have depression, who suffer from isolation, you're lonely, you're sad, you're sorrowful. You're getting old and you don't really know how to deal with old age, becoming invisible, irrelevant. One of the nice things about epics is that they're not stories. Stories relate to specific episodes that have to do with specific people or a person. Epics, on the other hand, they have universal themes. They cover all areas of life. They cover physical pleasure. They cover pleasure that comes with power. Not power as in health, but power to rule other people. They cover relationships that are meaningful, whether it's between a child and a mother or a father, or a husband and a wife or parents. It doesn't really matter, but relationships that are physical but meaningful. And then it also speaks about this juncture where the human being tries to relate to the physical, to the emotional, to the relationship aspects of life, but finds no remedy and goes on the spiritual quest in this desert. It's what we call the Mosaic Life. You're a prince, you begin to question your identity, you realize the past no longer makes meaning for you, you leave everything, and you spend the next 40 years of your life in the desert in hopes of finding some relevance, some meaning. And if you're lucky, you will first find the promised land within yourself, and then you will return to your society and try to take your people to the promised land, which is far more difficult. Okay? So that's how all spiritual quests start, and that's how they kind of live out, and that's how they end. It starts with you just being an ordinary, common human being. Certain things happen either externally or internally, what we call, say, like midlife crisis, kind of like Dante, for those of you who know the 13th century poet. Okay? In the middle of my years, I found myself in dark woods. Everything in life is going for you. You look at your husband, he's a stranger. You look at your parents, you can't find relevance or meaning. You look at yourself in the mirror and you have no idea who you are. You are psychologically in this dark forest. And the gods who live in the forest are called Pan, for panic. Okay? And then if you're lucky, if you can save yourself from depression and perhaps thoughts of suicide, maybe even suicide itself, if the gods like you, maybe the gates will open. You will understand a few things. And then you will realize that you have a brother who is very much like you. You have friends who are very much like you. And you go back and you try to drag them out into your world. It's called the Allegory of the Cave. And all of us in this class have had those moments, those experiences. Okay? If you have ever been with an alcoholic, for example, and you thought that you can make it work, and you can heal him or her, you try and you try and you try. And after a while you realize your trash bin on the inside is slowly becoming full. There comes a point where you can deal with this no more. You walk away. And then you sit back and you say, how could I have spent 10 years of my life hanging out with such a person, thinking that they could be rehabbed, that I would have the power to rehab them, but to no avail. And then you realize your sister is making the same mistake. What do? You go back into this cave because you want to rescue your sister. All of us in this class have lived out the allegory of the cave for ourselves as well as for other people. Okay? Remember, if any of these ideas ever become too complicated for you, too abstract for you, bring them, take them to your own life. Make them relevant for you. Don't worry about what Plato said. Have no concern for Jesus or Muhammad or the Buddha. They are dead. Don't care for them. These ideas are for us to be applied. Okay? So, I'm going to give you a very generic interpretation. And many of them, my own interpretation may be wrong. Okay? They make sense for me. I like them. It doesn't mean that you should like them. But if you were to be interested, go buy yourself a copy of the Epic of Gilgamesh, or you can find the entire thing online for free. No one knows how the story came about. In other words, it's kind of like the Old Testament or the New Testament. The Old Testament took 1,000 years to be put together. You and I, the best we can do, maybe live out, 50, 60, 70 years. Okay? So these stories go town to town, mouth to mouth, mouth to ears. Okay? Every town adds a bit, every town subtracts a bit, and after 1,000 years, you have a book called the Old Testament. The same thing with the New Testament. It took about 400 years. Okay? So I am sure that there was a man named Gilgamesh. They say he lived about 4,000 years ago. I don't really know. Okay? There was someone who had some experiences. And these are grand experiences. And these stories go from town to town. And every town begins to add certain things to the stories. Okay. Again, remember, it's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. I have no doubt if you go and purchase this book or read the book online, you will find certain parts of your own life, your own emotional life in the book. One of the nice things about epics is this. You don't have to go on this human journey on your own. You don't have to be curious just by yourself in the lonesome of your room. You don't have to be depressed by yourself. There are people who have lived before you, who have gone through this journey. They know the difficulties of being human. They know what love is. They know what loss does to the human psyche. They understand loneliness. They understand the desert life. They also understand what wisdom is. And they also do realize how wisdom is oftentimes misunderstood. So for those of you in this class who are going through stuff, there is no need for you to do it alone. Seek refuge in these great classic books. They contain a great amount of wisdom. Okay? The way writing came about is that you have these, what we call clay. It's really soft, red soil. For those of you in this class who like tennis and you have watched the French Open, I think it's over now, but that's what clay is. Okay. And so what you do is you wet the clay, you put it in this form, and then you put some scripts. Ancient people, like Egyptians, drew lines and maybe some pictures, and eventually it was called cuneiform. Okay. Now, up to date, as far as I know, and I haven't checked this for a long, long time, they have only found maybe about 23, 24 tablets, clay tablets. Out of these 24, 25 tablets that they have found, we have part of the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it is enormous. It is filled with subtleties and hidden wisdom that you just have to kind of unlayer, unpack for yourself. Okay? The first thing you need to know is this. Ancient people were not like us. It's like the man getting drunk, the woman being drunk, they have sex in the backseat of a truck. The woman comes to the man after 2 weeks and says, I'm pregnant. And the man says, okay, let's call him Billy Budd. It doesn't work that way. Names have significance. You are ultimately supposed to live your name, to embody your name. So if, God forbid, your mom named you Matthew, it goes back to the New Testament. There is this huge responsibility on your shoulder. I remember one time, long time ago in Davis, about 30, 40 years ago, as I was going from Davis, where I lived, to Sacramento City College. I sat next to this very young, attractive, good-looking African American man, and he looks at me and says, are you from the Middle East? I say, yes. Have you found your name? He said, my name is Amir. He says, well, yes, that's the name given to you by your parents, but have you found your own name? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. He said, my parents named me Baal, but I went on this quest, and I came to realize that my name is Ahmed. It's very much like the vision quest that the Native Americans go through. You're 12, the chief of your environment calls you into the tent, you smoke this pipe, you pass out, or maybe not, you have this vision, you see yourself by this river, you come out of this vision, okay? Your chief asks, the elder asks you, well, did you see anything? Was there an experience? You say, yes, I saw myself by this river. There was a bear coming to devour me. And all of a sudden the chief gets the hint. His name is supposed to be River Bear or something. And bear stands for wisdom, patience. Okay. So, the name Gilgamesh itself has profound significance. So let me tell you what the name means. But before I tell you what the name means, for those of you who've seen the movie Matrix, the first one, so you have Keanu Reeves. Okay. In the movie, his name is Neo. That's the name he aspires to be, which means light, which means one, which means transform. Okay. But he's not yet there. Sometimes he has to live a very counterfeit life, what the German philosopher Heidegger calls an inauthentic life. It's a life called the Truman Show. His name is Thomas A. Anderson. Thomas goes back to the disciple of Jesus Christ who was filled with doubt and skepticism. It didn't matter what Jesus did, how many miracles he performed. Okay? Even when he told his disciples that he is going to rise up from the dead and walk, even though Thomas saw that, he said, I will not believe that you have come back to life unless I touch your wounds. Even seeing him with his own eyes were not enough. He needed to touch. Anderson. Two words from Latin, ander and son, which means son of man. Okay. And A stands for alpha, the beginning. Neo, light. All of us in this class have doubts. We have doubts because we are son of man. We have all fallen. All of us desire to get to alpha, the beginning, the light, the complete, the unified. Okay? The name Gilgamesh means someone who's become aware of something. That something is the following. The name means an old man or an old human being who desires to become young. Every child that is born, go back to our talk from last night, they are going to be contaminated by the five senses. The five senses will burden them. Desires will be inspired within them. Okay? Now, the thing you need to know about desires is the following. See, all of us in this class have desires. You see a Tesla. It's an attractive car. You see a man or a woman on the street and they happen to be attractive. You desire them. There is nothing wrong with that. There is no sin in that. It's organic, it's natural. And depending on your culture, that desire will either be categorized as worthy of pursuit or unworthy of pursuit. Negative or positive. Okay? Now, whenever a desire comes to you, you have an inspiration. Inspiration creates imagination. Okay? Now, if you keep thinking about the object that inspired a desire inside you, this imagination will turn into a want. I want a Tesla. Almost all of us in this class want things, okay? But they never reach a stage where you actually physically, emotionally pursue them. Why? Because the most important component in a desire to be pursued is missing. Unless a desire turns into a need. The moment you have a need, you have a relationship between yourself and this desire. It is emotionally charged. Okay? So when you read the Bible, when you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, and you say, I desire to go on the spiritual quest very much like Gilgamesh did. It's a great desire to have. You're inspired. Good for you. Imagination will blossom. You may even want to go to the library and check out more books on the spiritual quest. But want, you can always pass it by, because it's not strong enough to keep you in itself. But the moment it turns into a need, okay, it becomes relevant for you. It nourishes your spirit, your mind, your imagination. Okay? Need is your emotional connection, and without it, you feel empty and irrelevant. Just go back and think about those moments when you fell in love, where you needed to talk to this person, needed to see them. Without this need being satisfied, you feel incomplete. Okay? Again, go back to our conversation last night. If you don't feel the need to see Socrates, you're not there yet. You may desire. You may be inspired by him. You may have imaginations about him. You may even have dreams of him or her. It doesn't really matter. Okay? You may even want to be around them. Okay? But remember, the world is a big advertisement place. It's a competition. Need destroys all the competitions out there to protect itself. Okay? My brother wants a Tesla. So he signed up for a Tesla. He doesn't want to buy any other car. He has this need. He wants to save the earth. He doesn't want to spend any more money on gas. So he's been waiting for about a year. He needs a Tesla. And he's willing, patiently, to wait for this car to come to him. Okay? So remember, whenever you find yourself in the world of need, you are in trouble. You become an addict. And need happens only when you spend a lot of time with the object of desire. Okay? So, this is the story of all human beings who are born. No one in this room, and no one ever is born being young. Everybody inherits the disease called being human. There comes a point for Gilgamesh though, he says, I am tired. I am tired of pursuing, and in the end being left empty. There is this poem that we have in the Persian world. I'm not quite sure who the poet is. ساقیا بده جامی زان شراب روحانی تا دمی بیاسایم زین حجاب جسمانی. If you go to a bar, there is a man or a woman behind the counter serving you beer or wine, or some liquor. Okay. That person is Saqi, the bartender. Jam is a cup, container. Sharab is wine. And this particular poet laments, complains. All these desires are like wine. They empty the cup of my consciousness, the cup of my soul. And I pursue them. I drink them. They are fun. It's fun to have desires and pursue them. The only problem is, after a while, I realize that when I sober up, I realize I was deceived by this desire. It leaves me empty. And I want something, but I don't know what it is. So he says, it's sort of a prayer, that I'm looking for a wine, or I'm looking for a desire, I'm looking for a need. Okay. That brings me to a completion, to maturity, to wisdom, to rest. Remember the saying in the Gospels? The birds have the earth, or the trees. The foxes have the earth, but Son of Man has no place to rest his head. All of us have no choice but to be in this rat race. And you don't even have to be in a race, but you certainly are a rat. Because you and I go from one desire to another. And that makes us old. Makes us tired and exhausted. Okay. So, what happened is that, before continuing with the name of Gilgamesh, he has a father who is immortal, made of flesh and bones. He has a mother who is a goddess. Her name is Ninsun. She lives in paradise somewhere. This goddess looks down, and there is this man, somewhat attractive, comes out and says, let's have sex. And the guy says, yes, of course. Who wouldn't want to have sex with a goddess? The product is Gilgamesh, which makes Gilgamesh 2/3 God, 1/3 human. If you're a Christian, the kingdom of God lives inside you. If you're a Jew, you are made in the image of God. If you're a Muslim, the light of Muhammad lives inside you. If you're a Taoist, you have the Te, or life force, within you. And what I'm trying to suggest is all these traditions have one thing in common. They all argue that there is something profoundly unique about being human. There's a reason why we want to be creative. There's a reason why we are inspired. There's a reason why we feel empathy and compassion sometimes when we are in the presence of someone who needs or is in pain. There is, for the Greeks, they have this thing called the ages of men, or the age of human creation. The first is called the golden race. The golden race, they don't work. They don't need to work. They don't wear clothing. They have no shame about their bodies. There is no private property. There are no Safeways because food grows directly out of the earth. There is no reason for anyone to talk to anyone because everyone understands each other in silence. It's the Garden of Eden. They bask in light and wisdom. And when they die, they suffer no pain. They simply go to sleep and never wake up. That's it. Fast forward, we get to the Iron Race. And the reason why Iron Race came about is because after the silver, after the bronze, human beings became a little naughty. They made too much noise. They upset Zeus. So Zeus, with his thunderbolt, destroyed humanity. But here's the thing. When you destroy a charcoal by lighting it on fire, it became ash because of fire. The Iron Race, which is us, there is a good part of us that is contaminated by Zeus's lightning bolt. There is fire inside you and I, but there is also ash, the meat, the flesh, the desire for power, the desire for sex and alcohol, the desire to get married and have children, the desire to be part of life. Now, what you will find most interesting is this. You would assume that being 2/3 God and 1/3 human, the 2/3 would win. But that's not the case. The 2/3 never wins. The divine part that exists in human beings, according to all these traditions, it always gets trampled upon, dominated by the fleshy and the least important. Okay. So, before we continue, then you need to remember a couple of things. You're all in this class old. You're old because of the desires that live inside us, and because the senses connect you and I so intensely, horrifyingly intensely, to the physical world. Okay? There is divinity within you and I. You will never be able to remember and to apply the divinity within you. You will not remember it and you will never apply it. You will never have the power to turn the secular into sacred. Why? You will push it into forgetfulness. Jane has children. I have children. And I'll tell you how kids work. The moment they're able to walk, they have wings. They run, they destroy, they break. They know no boundaries. They live fast and they live hard through their inspirations. And then the parents become the first domesticators. As Jean-Jacques Rousseau would say, we are the first people to contaminate our children. We have tasted life. We know how dangerous it is. Parents have a tendency of clipping the wings off of their kids. Do you know how difficult it is to put a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old in these seats and hold them down for 3 hours? Never. But adults, a little bit of fear, a little bit of desire, a little bit of imagination, you can exploit them in all sorts of ways. Now, because Gilgamesh is 2/3 God, he has all the qualities that gods have. He's strong. He's attractive. He doesn't have the wisdom because it's been forgotten. He doesn't have compassion because it has been forgotten. He has the exterior of the God, but the interior of Satan, of being human. Okay. And he happens to be a king. You can take that literally, you can take that metaphorically. For those of you in this class who have been gifted with good looks and nice looking nose, nice looking lips, you're tall, you have beautiful hair. What happens when you go to a party? You shine. People want to be around you. They want to devour you as you want to devour them. You are the light in the party. There is a man named Søren Kierkegaard. He's a Danish philosopher. A nice looking man, I think. A bit of a hunchback. But one of the things that you need to know about introverts, like Jesus Christ, like Søren Kierkegaard, is that they like stories. They can't speak like us, plainly, crudely, pointedly. They suffer too much from psychic tension within. They are rich with emotions. So Kierkegaard would go to these gatherings, to these parties, and he would tell joke after joke after joke. He would make people laugh. He was the sun. When the party would end, he would walk home alone. He would walk home alone because he didn't want anyone around. No one understood him. And he said, I just wanted to shoot myself. So regardless of your noble intentions, if nature or DNA or your genes have given you good looks, or you're able to use language eloquently, articulately, you are a king to gatherings. People will listen to you. People will follow you. But they don't really understand something very important about you. Despite all of your exterior eloquence, deep down, you are human. You are contaminated. The 2/3 divine will never come up. It'll never refine and baptize your intentions.